Welcome to the Ask Chris Real Estate Podcast with Chris Phillips from Keller Williams. A successful 20-year veteran in the Middle Tennessee real estate market with over 100 five-star reviews, Chris is known for his knowledge and integrity. Whether you're buying, selling, investing, or just curious, his insight will guide you along the way.
Hello everybody. Today we're going to decode the purchase and sales contract, and we're going to dive into some overall details about the purchase and sales contract, particularly to the Tennessee Association Realtor TAR contract that I have here in front of me. It's 11 pages, and it is a contract that every real estate agent uses here in Tennessee. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and why it's important to know what you're signing and what is it you're agreeing to. I have a lot of people that look at these contracts, they just sign it, and then we move on to it. So they don't know what they're signing. They don't know what they're agreeing to. They don't know the deadlines on it, and all of these things are real important when you're signing this contract. So let's kind of get into it, and let's talk a little bit about the key terms that every buyer should know. And the first one is the purchase price. What are you agreeing to pay for the property? When you're buying a piece of property, you need to know what you're agreeing to. And sometimes those things could include credits. They could include concessions or adjustments. So you need to know what that purchase price is and what it means. And an example of that would be if you're buying a house for $200,000 and you've agreed that the seller is going to pay $5,000 of your closing cost. So that the seller is going to give you that $5,000 to pay that expense towards your closing cost. And you need to know that so that you can account for that budget-wise when you're looking to purchase this home. The next one's earnest money, and this is a real important one. And I'm going to back up a little bit. I want to talk about how important purchase money or earnest money is. When we talk about earnest money, this is going to indicate to the seller how much you are dedicated to purchasing this property. So it's going to convey to that seller, I'm very interested in buying this property, and on how much earnest money you're going to put up. Now, for a lot of people, that's really hard to do. They might be doing an FHA loan where they only have 3.5% to put down, or a VA loan, and they don't have any money to put down. And VA loans can be 100% financed, or a USDA loan where you're putting no money down. But you still need earnest money, and you're going to have to either roll your closing cost into the price of the property if that's available, or pay those expenses out of your pocket. So earnest money is important. And usually that's 1% to 2% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a $200,000 house, that's going to be or $200,000 house is going to be $2,000 earnest money, or $4,000 earnest money if it's 1% to 2%. Again, I tell my buyers a lot of times, the more you can put down in earnest money, the more serious this seller is going to take you, especially in a competitive market that we've had over the last years here in Tennessee. Closing dates. Now, guys, dates are important. They are super important. And the closing date is not the only date that we have to worry about. We need to worry about our inspection time period. And that is all off of, and we call that a binding agreement date. So what a binding agreement date is when the buyer and the seller have signed the purchase and sales agreement, and then the third party has verified both signatures, and that's usually either the buyer's agent or the seller's agent, whichever one will bind it. And that date goes for everything. So let's use this for example. We purchased this property on July the 4th, and we bind it on July the 4th. So all of our timelines are issued on that binding agreement date. So for instance, if we have a 10-day period in inspections, that means all of our inspections have to be done in a 10-day period. That means all of our contingencies, such as your due diligence period for making sure that you're satisfied with the survey, the inspection of the property itself, any HOA documents that you want to review or have somebody else look at, those are things that you're wanting to do in this 10-day period. Now, here is where a lot of people make mistakes. And I see this with a lot of real estate agents that are new in the business, especially the ones that have gotten in since COVID, since 2020. These guys don't know how to count the inspection period. And here is a key fact with Tennessee real estate contracts. Again, we binded it on the 4th. The first day doesn't actually start on the 4th. It actually starts on the 5th. Now, we have 10 days from the 5th to do our inspection, which means it ends on July the 15th. So if we complete our inspections and we submit the repairs we want the seller to do, and then we negotiate those repairs, as long as we've done that in that 10-day period, we're okay. Here's where it can get hairy. And this is where rookie agents make mistakes. They think the period ends on the 10th day, but that 10th day rolls on a Sunday or a Saturday. It's going to roll to the next business day, which is going to be that Monday. So actually you pick up 2 days if it's on a Saturday or a Sunday. So it can roll there. And it explicitly says that in the contract. So you need to be aware of that. So really you're getting a 12-day inspection period, and those are key. And I've seen it happen in reverse when I'm the seller's agent and they miscalculate the inspection period and they think they have another day and they've exceeded their day on the market or their days in the contingency. So that causes them to either have to accept the property as is, or my seller and myself have to decide, hey, are we going to, make them take the property as is, or are we going to practice good faith and say, yeah, we'll fix some things even though you missed this, and that's why dates are so important. Fixtures and exclusions. Now, what that means is what stays with the property. Now, I'm going to give you a great example of this. Grandma buys or is getting ready to sell her house, and she has a chandelier in her dining room that's been in the family for 50 years, and that is not staying with the property. Most sellers will remove that before they put the house on the market, but there's some times where they won't do that, and they'll put in there that they're excluding the chandelier in the dining room. Normally that chandelier would stay with the property, and if we don't put that in the contract, that chandelier is going to be removed. So if you're the buyer's agent, you need to tell your buyers, look, normally the chandelier would remain with the property. They've excluded it. They've let us know that. We need to put this in the purchase and sales agreement so both parties know this is not remaining. Another thing here in Tennessee is the stove remains, the microwave remains, and the dishwasher remains. The refrigerator is always negotiable. However, over the last 3 to 5 years, the refrigerator is most of the time conveyed with the sale of the property. Make sure that you emphasize the refrigerator in the house and not the one in the garage. I have seen it where we went to do our final walkthrough and the seller has tried to do a switcheroo and they've left the refrigerator that was in the garage, they've put it in the house and said, well, you didn't specify which refrigerator you were going to leave. So you've got to be careful because sometimes sellers will try to do some sneaky things. What remains with the property? So a good rule of thumb here in Tennessee is anything that's attached to the property. So if it is something that's affixed to the property, that would be light fixtures, that would be security systems that are paid for, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. That would also be things like vanity mirrors, those things that are attached to the property, those are going to remain with it. And it specifically says that in the contract. Also, it'll tell you things like the brackets for the TV. They'll leave the brackets because they don't want those holes in there. So the actual bracket that mounts the TV will remain with the property here in Tennessee. They can take the TV with them, but they got to leave the brackets so that the buyer can put their TV on those brackets. All right. Possession dates. That's important. Here in Tennessee, usually we do possession the day that we sign. Now, in some instance, that can't take place, and that's where things can get a little hairy. If I'm on the buyer side, I'm telling the buyer, you want to take possession once you give them the money, and you want it, that day. Sometimes that's not possible. I'm going to give you an example of that. And that doesn't apply here to our purchase and sales agreement. And the reason why is because this usually happens with new construction. If we close after 2 or 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon on the 30th of the month and the loan doesn't fund, what's going to happen is the builder's not going to give the keys to the buyer until it funds. So it's important for us to determine that we're going to close earlier in the day so the bank has enough time to fund that so that the builder can verify that, and then they will provide the keys. So that's why possession date is really important. Other than that, that is sometimes negotiable. Some people come from out of state, like Michigan or Illinois, and in their areas, they take possession later on. In some cases, 30 days later, which is just crazy to me. But we try to eliminate that and not let that happen, because that brings up a whole another issue about insurance, like who's responsible if something happens in the house. If you're taking possession and in a later date and the house is yours and the seller's still in there, and usually we'll hold some earnest money back for that to protect the buyer in that case.
For answers to all your real estate questions, ask Chris at the Phillips Group, Murfreesboro, Tennessee.